On this episode of China Uncensored, stories from the mainland. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Today I have a special episode for you. I've done a lot of stories about politics and human rights in China, but what's it actually like to visit China? I mean, as a tourist or an expat, you're probably not going to find yourself in the middle of a game of deadly political cat and mouse, and you're probably not doing anything in Tiananmen Square besides taking some pictures. But that doesn't mean you won't realize that from time to time, you're not in Kansas anymore. This story comes from one of you, a fan of China Uncensored who spent some time recently in China. I won't give this person's name, just in the off chance local authorities might want to invite him to tea. So recently on the outskirts of Beijing, they held the 5th Strawberry Music Festival. In general, it seems like a fairly pleasant outdoor music festival that didn't devolve into utter chaos the way some music festivals do. This fan, whom I'll call Augustus and assign a masculine gender, was there with some friends. Now, Augustus and one of his friends live in Tianjin, a city about 70 miles away. They thought if they left 2 hours before the concert ended, they'd be able to catch the last subway or taxi out of town, but they missed it and found themselves stranded in Beijing for the night. No problem. Augustus knew some hostels around Qianmen, that's pretty close to Tiananmen. They'd just spend the night. But this is where things start to get weird. Augustus asked the girl behind the counter of some hostel if he can get a private split bedroom. Sure, she just needs to see their IDs. That's when she found out that Augustus's friend was Chinese. No, she says. You have to get 2 rooms because it's illegal for Chinese and foreigners to share a same room.
Oh.
It's illegal for Chinese and foreigners to share a room. Augustus told me that the girl told him they, and by they he thinks she meant local authorities, had a meeting just 3 days before and decided that Chinese were not to share rooms with foreigners, and the police had been to all the hostels in the area informing them of this new law. What if he had a Chinese girlfriend? Nope, separate rooms. What if they were married? Well, if they could show a marriage certificate, that might be okay. When Augustus asked if there was a reason for the sudden apartheid, she just laughed. She had no idea why they were suddenly being told to keep foreigners and Chinese apart, but also felt it was a little strange. Augustus went around the corner to another hostel just to see if this was for real. Yep, only this guy gave a reason. Police had told the other hostel staff that Chinese people who stay with foreigners will steal from them while they're sleeping. It don't matter if you're black or white. But if you're Chinese, you're probably a dirty thief. Now, here's the strange thing. It's almost as if the Chinese regime wants to keep Chinese people away from foreigners. I know a guy who went to Beijing Normal University, sounds normal, right? And all the foreigners, Americans, British, Japanese, Koreans, stayed in one dorm, and the Chinese students had their dorm all the way on the other side of campus. And it was next to impossible to join clubs with Chinese students. It wasn't not allowed, but it was such an ordeal to even sign up, it might as well have been. So why the segregation? Well, let me put it this way. I know a guy, he's Caucasian, and he once worked with this young woman from China. Now, the guy practices Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that's been on the wrong end of the beating stick with the Chinese regime for over a decade. He mentions it to this woman and she says, "You're in that suicide cult?" And so he tries to explain that it's not a suicide cult, that that's just propaganda put out by the Chinese regime, just like the Tiananmen Square massacre. And she says, "What's the Tiananmen Square massacre?" That's when there were all those protests in Tiananmen Square in '89, and oh, that's when all those students went crazy and started attacking unarmed police, and they were forced to fight back lest the students destroy the nation. Yeah. That could be why they don't want Chinese people and foreigners to mix too much. They might get confused by alternative versions of the truth. Those two eventually got married, by the way. But so I realize many of you who watch China Uncensored have probably visited or lived in China. So if you have a good story you're dying to get off your chest, please send them my way and I might be able to share your story with the world. You can either write me on China Uncensored's Facebook, or you can email me at chinauncensored@ntdtv.com. So get writing. We're all waiting to hear your stories from the mainland. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored, and thank you once again, Augustus. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.